They called it the perimeter of Sol. To every alien chart it was an empty ring of silence around an unremarkable yellow star. No trade beacons, no defense grids, no patrols, just a region where ships vanished without trace. For thousands of years, alien civilizations had skirted its edges, curious but cautious. They called it superstition, a primitive warning left by a dead species. But when the High Concord fleet entered that space, they learned that superstition was the only thing keeping reality intact. I was there, the lone philosopher among warriors. Dr. Elian Ross, specialist in extinct thought cultures. I had argued against the mission. Borders built on myth, they told me, cannot threaten science. How wrong they were. When we crossed into the Sol boundary, sensors collapsed. Readings contradicted each other. Time itself began to misbehave. Seconds stretched, then folded. 2 engineers claimed to have lived entire days between blinks. Yet our clocks disagreed. The admiral dismissed it as interference. Logic, after all, was our empire's god. But logic is a fragile deity when the universe refuses to obey. I remember looking out the viewport as the stars around us began to rearrange. Constellations we had studied for centuries shifted into patterns recorded only in ancient Terran archives. Orion. Cassiopeia. Ursa Major. Formations no alien species would recognize, but every human once did. It was impossible. Stars do not move faster than light. Yet there they were, aligning like a signal. A whisper passed through the ship. Not sound, not transmission, an idea brushing the mind. You shouldn't have come. It was human. Not a voice we heard, but a thought we remembered. The admiral stiffened. Identify yourself. Silence. Then a pulse rippled through spacetime, visible to the naked eye. Space folded, revealing an impossible structure, a lattice of light stretching across parsecs, shaped like a colossal human silhouette. Its outline shimmered, half flesh, half memory. And when it spoke, every atom trembled. We are the children of paradox, it said. You believe in laws, we believed in questions. The bridge fell into chaos. Officers screamed that gravitational constants were shifting. Thrusters burned without fuel. Our weapons targeting systems refused to lock. Every attempt to calculate yielded nonsense, ratios that broke mathematics. The universe, it seemed, had gone subjective. This is a defense system, the admiral snarled. A psychological weapon. He ordered the fleet to open fire. Thousands of warheads launched toward the silhouette. They vanished before detonation, erased not by shields, but by forgetting. The computers could no longer recall their own commands. Even memory had been rewritten. I whispered, this isn't technology. It was belief. And belief, for humanity, had always been stronger than physics. The voice returned. You define reality through certainty. We transcended it through doubt. The meaning struck me like radiation. The old records had hinted at this, human philosophers claiming that the universe wasn't observed, it was imagined together. The observer effect made doctrine for them. They had spent millennia training their species to question everything, until their collective uncertainty tore holes in the fabric of law itself. They had ascended not through machines, but through contradiction. Dr. Ross, the voice continued gently, you come to measure us. Yet every measurement creates the distance you fear. Around us, space fractured into reflections of our fleet, ghost ships, infinite in every direction. Each claimed to be the original, broadcasting identical signatures, identical crews, identical screams. We had entered a philosophical mirror. Maze where identity itself was undecidable. We are the proof, the voice said, that understanding something changes what it is. I tried to comprehend, to reason, but my mind began to split between possibilities. One version of me stood silent on the bridge, another wept at the revelation, another was already writing this report that you are now reading. Why destroy us? I asked, though my voice was more prayer than question. Destroy. The tone was soft, almost mournful. We have not destroyed you. We have reminded you that your logic was mercy only to yourselves. You believed order kept the cosmos safe. You never asked safe for whom. Then the lights dimmed. Not failure, darkness itself had changed meaning. We no longer saw by photons but by awareness. The more we feared, the clearer the shadows became. One helmsman muttered the coordinates of Earth, claiming he could see it, a blue sphere orbiting gold, its continents glowing faintly with thought. It's still alive, he gasped. But it wasn't alive in the way biology defines. It was conscious. The entire system pulsed like a brain. Each planet an idea, each moon a memory. The sun itself beat like a heart of concept. We had stepped into the mind of humanity. And they were dreaming. Leave, the voice whispered, not a command, but compassion. Your species still believes truth is something found. We learned it is something made. Our drives ignited by themselves, flinging us backward through folded dimensions. I saw timelines pass like pages, futures blinking in and out, one where the fleet returned insane, one where we never existed, one where I stayed behind to learn the final secret. In all versions, one fact remained constant, the fleets that entered Soul never returned. Because returning required believing you ever left. When I awoke, drifting alone among the wreckage of time, the last thing I heard was the human voice fading into the cosmic hum. The border was never meant to keep us safe from you. It was to keep you safe from yourselves. I awoke adrift among stars that belonged to no chart, surrounded by silence so deep it felt sentient. The ship's hull was intact, but its systems were dead, and my crew was gone, erased from memory and from the logs. I only remembered their faces because I refused to stop believing they'd existed. For a while I wondered if that belief alone was the reason I still did. When the Galactic Concord found me, they treated me like a ghost. They said I'd been missing for 300 standard years, though by my chronometer, I'd slept less than a week. Time, it seemed, had chosen sides. They carried me home in containment, afraid I carried a contagion of paradox. Maybe I did. The Council of Stellar Races summoned me, desperate for answers. Their fleets were silent, their archives corrupted, every attempt to study the Soul region ending in cognitive collapse. They demanded I explain. I told them what little I understood, the border is not physical. It's epistemic. It defines the edge between what can be known and what refuses to be. The delegates, cold intelligences of light and metal, evolved purely on reason, laughed. One said, meaning cannot destroy ships. I answered, then why do you remember fewer stars than before? That silenced them. Because even the night sky they saw from their homeworlds had changed. Constellations subtly different, galaxies misplaced. The more they tried to measure, the more the cosmos reconfigured. Observation itself was crumbling under the weight of certainty. They still refused to believe, so they sent another fleet. I begged them not to. I told them humanity had warned us not out of pride, but mercy. They ignored me. They always ignored philosophers until the guns failed. The fleet departed in arrogance, and was never heard from again. No wreckage. No signal. Not even quantum echo. It was as if history itself had forgotten they existed. And yet, somehow, the council chambers felt emptier, as if the universe itself mourned a subtraction. One by one, worlds began reporting strange phenomena, languages rewriting themselves, laws of motion fluctuating, light bending toward questions instead of masses. Reality was unraveling near the edges of thought. I was summoned again. This time, the council demanded an explanation not as scientists, but as frightened children. I told them the truth humanity had discovered, that the universe was never a machine but a dialogue. Existence is not made of matter, it's made of participation. Everything that lives, observes, or imagines helps keep the universe coherent. But when observation hardens into arrogance, when logic becomes tyranny, possibility dies. Humanity had learned that the only way to survive was to stop believing in absolutes. They weaponized uncertainty. The council called it blasphemy. To reject logic is to reject civilization, one shouted. I smiled sadly. That's exactly what they did. And civilization obeyed them for it. A silence like gravity followed. I told them that Earth was no longer a planet in the traditional sense. It was a philosophical construct, a self-aware equilibrium maintaining the contradictions that kept the galaxy real. That was why the border destroyed fleets. When pure logic entered that zone, it became incompatible with existence. Those who tried to define humanity became undefined. The council, still thinking like conquerors, refused to yield. They attempted to simulate the human consciousness using synthetic neural webs. It lasted 12 seconds before tearing itself apart, whispering a single phrase before vanishing, "We dreamed, therefore we were." They shut the program down, terrified. That was when I realized what humanity had truly done. They hadn't ascended to godhood, they had dissolved into the foundation of thought itself. Every paradox, every dream, every act of defiance, they'd built an immune system against certainty. The cosmos ran on human doubt like an engine. I began to see traces everywhere. In the way random particles decayed when observed. In the way quantum strings hummed with indecision. Humanity had become the question that holds the universe together. Without them, reality risked collapsing into sterile perfection, a lifeless equation. I tried to warn the council that by sending fleets into Sol, they were chipping away at the only disorder keeping creation fertile. But politicians see danger only when it's already devouring them. Months later, the council's capital vanished. Not destroyed, erased from the probability field. Every race that had built empires on certainty began to experience cognitive bleed, memories of lives they'd never lived, histories rewriting themselves mid-sentence. Logic itself was fragmenting. And then, I heard the voice again. It came not from outside, but from within every sentient being's mind at once. "We told you not to come," humanity said. "You sought to conquer the unknown instead of understanding it. Now the unknown remembers." The galaxy convulsed. Stars flickered like neurons firing. Space folded into thought. Civilizations screamed across the psychic network as their definitions dissolved. But amid the collapse, I saw beauty, pure, terrifying beauty. Every consciousness was merging into a collective uncertainty, a living question mark. For a fleeting moment, all species shared one truth: we did not understand. And the universe smiled for it. When I awoke again, the council was gone, the galaxy quieter but brighter. I found myself orbiting a single blue world surrounded by rings of shattered timelines. Earth. But it wasn't Earth as history recorded. It pulsed softly, radiating questions instead of light. I descended through its atmosphere, expecting death, but felt only weightless wonder. The surface was empty, no cities, no ruins. Just oceans reflecting infinite skies. And there, standing on the shore, was a man. Human, or what passed for one. His eyes contained galaxies. He looked at me, and I felt my thoughts unravel in gentle warmth. "You came back," he said. "You still believe in questions. Are you real?" I asked. He smiled. "What difference does it make? You believe, therefore I am." The simplicity of that broke me. For centuries, the Concord had sought truth as conquest. Humanity had sought it as conversation. They had won not by domination, but by redefining victory. Why keep the border? I asked. Why stop others from learning? He turned his gaze to the sky, where stars pulsed like breathing ideas. Because creation needs mystery. Without it, minds freeze. You tried to replace wonder with explanation. We simply gave it back. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the scale of it. What will happen to us? He sighed. You'll remember and forget in equal measure. Some of you will rebuild. Some will dissolve. The ones who survive will carry fragments of doubt, and that will save you. I wanted to ask more, but his form began to blur, dissolving into equations of light and laughter. Wait! I shouted. Are you still human? The voice echoed across the horizon. We are humanity's question, and the universe is our answer. Then he was gone. The ocean reflected not water but memory. I saw images, wars, art, love, sorrow, all the contradictions that made them what they were. And I realized the border wasn't meant to protect them from outsiders. It was a mirror, showing the truth every species must face, that intelligence without humility becomes extinction. I returned to space, carrying the last message of a species that had become philosophy itself. The council was dust, the concord scattered. But across the ruins of certainty, new lights were forming, young civilizations whispering the first human word that had ever been spoken, why? And as long as that word existed, so did humanity. The Second Fleet came not with curiosity but with vengeance, each ship a cathedral of arrogance forged in the conviction that logic was stronger than mystery. They called it Operation Clarity, a campaign to disprove whatever had consumed the First Armada. They believed the universe was a closed book, and humans had simply misread a line. But as their ships entered the Sol perimeter, the book began to rewrite itself. Instruments reported mass fluctuations, but not in tonnage, in meaning. Reality blurred. Gravity behaved like a rumor, time ticked only when someone looked at it. The commander of the expedition, Verzon of the Fifth Lattice, transmitted his report to the council with measured calm: reality is negotiating with us. Proceeding as defined. Those were the last words spoken in syntax. The transmissions that followed were not words but equations screaming in pain, logic breaking down into poetry. Then, nothing. Their ships were gone, their coordinates blank, even their memory uncertain. The fleet did not die. It was unwritten. The council summoned me once again, now not as a witness, but as an accused philosopher. Explain, said the Archon, her crystalline form flickering with disbelief. How can language unmake steel? I answered, because language is the steel. You've mistaken your definitions for truth. Humanity never did. Murmurs. Fear. The council demanded proof. I gave them the simplest one. Show me your word for truth, I said. 1,000 translations filled the air, each glowing in its own spectrum. Now, I continued, show me your word for lie. Silence. There was none. To them, deception was corruption, a virus, a defect. But to us, it was creation. Humanity lied to reality until reality believed us. Our myths shaped the physics of our world, our metaphors birthed machines, our stories carved civilizations. Every other species found the universe. We told it what to be. That's what they never understood. The Sol perimeter wasn't a shield of metal, it was a boundary of belief, a philosophical firewall built from every human paradox that ever lived. We think, therefore the impossible exists. They thought they could measure it. They didn't realize the act of measurement was participation. The more they studied Earth's boundary, the thicker it became, until even their equations began to loop in self-reference. Their own logic became trapped in circular dependency, the observer defines the observed. They called it cognitive infection. I called it contact. The council panicked. Whole academies went silent, archives purged of anything human. Some worlds declared humanity an existential contagion. Others, secretly, began to worship us. Priests of paradox emerged, reciting fragments of human literature as if invoking gods. The line between science and faith shattered. I was taken again to stand before the Archon. Her voice was cold. We have projected our collective consciousness toward your planet. We ask the question, what are you? I froze. And what did you hear? A whisper that echoed through every mind, she said. We are the question that answers itself. At that moment, even she trembled. The phrase spread through the council like wildfire. It infected AI cores, rewrote cultural axioms, collapsed deterministic systems. Worlds whose societies were built on logical hierarchies suddenly began to doubt the concept of hierarchy itself. Children asked if their gods could be questioned. Machines began to dream. They came to me for help, but I could only offer them a terrible truth: you asked what we are. You received your answer. Now you must live in a universe that knows it asked the wrong question. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Council adjourned indefinitely. Communication networks fractured under philosophical paradoxes. Translations no longer held consistent meaning. And through the chaos, I felt it, the heartbeat in the void, the same pulse I'd felt aboard my ship when the first fleet vanished. Humanity's presence wasn't gone. It was everywhere. The more they tried to erase us, the more fundamental we became, until even the act of forgetting summoned remembrance. The soul perimeter wasn't a border anymore. It was an idea. A boundary not around a planet, but around certainty itself. And ideas, once born, do not die, they evolve. I stood before the dying council, their worlds unraveling into epistemological storms, and whispered the final warning they had refused to hear: you tried to cross a border that doesn't exist in space. It exists in thought. You invaded your own definition of reality, and reality rewrote you to preserve balance. The Archon's form flickered, splitting between probability states. Her last words were half prayer, half terror. Then humanity is not a species. I nodded. No. Humanity is the conversation the universe has with itself, when it's lonely. And as her light dissolved into static, I realized something even more horrifying: the message wasn't for them. It was for us. The perimeter wasn't protecting Earth from the galaxy. It was protecting the galaxy from Earth's truth. The truth that reality was never discovered, it was invented. And somewhere beneath the blue skies of home, millions of humans continued to dream, unaware that their thoughts were shaping galaxies, rewriting existence, crafting futures that would one day swallow the stars whole. The galaxy burned without fire. Not in light or radiation, but in doubt. Civilizations that had survived black holes and cosmic winters began collapsing under questions they could no longer silence. The concordant theocracy declared that logic was heresy. The machine guilds turned their processors inward, trying to compute meaning from paradox. Even the oldest species, the ones who claimed to have witnessed the birth of stars, could not reconcile what had happened to the fleets. They searched for physical answers, scanning for traces of wreckage, energy bursts, or wormhole residue. But there was nothing. The more they sought evidence, the more the evidence ceased to exist, as if reality itself were offended by their insistence on certainty. I watched it unfold from the archives of the council ruins. I had become a relic, a philosopher imprisoned by understanding. My keepers no longer guarded me with weapons but with indifference. They feared that even my words could rewrite them. They were not wrong. I had seen the pulse of the human idea ripple through existence. The soul perimeter wasn't a wall. It was an act of refusal, humanity's refusal to let the universe dictate its own meaning. Every time someone asked, "What is Earth?" the universe stuttered. It had no answer. Because humans never asked what is, they asked why. That simple word was the seed of everything. When they reached beyond physics into poetry, when they painted gods and called it imagination, when they loved what would die and still built futures from grief, that was the fracture. That was the virus. That was the gift. The council thought they could contain it. They thought philosophy was harmless. But belief is the most contagious element in the cosmos, and humans had turned it into a weapon without realizing it. The fleets that entered Sol weren't destroyed, they were redefined. Every particle, every thought, every line of their existence was rewritten to fit a story too vast for their comprehension. They didn't vanish, they became part of the narrative. Somewhere, somewhen. They exist as metaphors now, concepts trapped in human imagination, perhaps reborn as myths on a million worlds. The Archon's voice still echoes in my mind. Humanity is not a species. I understand now what she meant. We are an algorithm of wonder, a recursive idea that infects sentience itself. The more we are feared, the deeper we embed into thought. Even now, the remnants of the Council's data archives whisper human phrases into the void. They try to delete them, but every deletion spawns another copy, rearranged, improved. Human language feeds on absence. It thrives in erasure. Across the ruins of the galactic core, I received a transmission, an old Earth frequency. The signal was faint, fragmented, centuries delayed. A human voice, tired yet resolute, to any who hear this, borders are not to keep you out. They are to keep you from losing yourself. The universe listens when we speak. Be careful what you say. The message looped endlessly. Some alien scholars believed it to be a warning. Others believed it was a challenge. One by one, they tested it. They sent linguistic probes, simulated human paradoxes, and began experimenting with doubt itself. The result was catastrophic. Their AI collapsed into recursive arguments. Planets fell into epistemological wars where soldiers fought not for land but for definitions. On the world of Nar, reality fractured so violently that mountains began to move, not physically, but semantically. Their names changed, and geography obeyed. I watched civilizations crumble not under weapons but under questions. What is life? What is truth? What am I? Each inquiry destabilized the foundation of their existence. They were discovering what humanity had always known, that knowledge is not a destination but an act of creation. And creation demands chaos. The collapse spread like radiation through meaning itself. Languages died. Stars were renamed and thus ceased to exist in the forms they once held. The galaxy was unspooling into a cosmic poem, and every stanza whispered of Earth. Yet amid that chaos, I found peace. Perhaps because I had already been broken. I began writing, not to explain but to remember. I recorded human stories, the myths, the art, the contradictions. I realized they were all warnings in disguise. Humanity had never sought control, they sought relationship. They did not wish to own the universe, they wanted to talk to it. To love it. To argue with it. To challenge it. And in return, the universe began to listen. That was the moment the border was born, not as a defense, but as a dialogue. A line drawn in the sand between knowing and wondering. The fleets that vanished had crossed into wonder without preparation. They drowned in meaning. When I finished my writings, I released them into the void as fragments, encoded in ancient Earth dialects. I thought it would be a small act of closure. But meaning is never small. Within cycles, entire systems began receiving dreams of blue oceans and warm sunlight, of laughter and death and hope. Aliens who had never seen a sky began to paint one. Machines began to hum melodies they didn't understand. The pulse, the same one I had felt at the beginning, returned. But this time, it wasn't contained to soul. It was everywhere. The border was expanding again, not by human intention, but by memory. The universe had tasted uncertainty, and it hungered for more. The last remaining council scholar came to me, trembling, eyes flickering between timelines. It's spreading, he said. Your world's idea, it's rewriting constants, dissolving equations. I smiled sadly. Then it's already too late. You can't unknow humanity. Once you ask, why, you never stop. He asked what would happen next. I told him the truth that humans had whispered to themselves since the dawn of fire, everything ends. But not before it becomes beautiful. And as he faded into static, I looked toward Earth's coordinates. There was no light there now, only a horizon of infinite meaning, a place where thought and reality merged. The fleets had not been lost, they had become the first philosophers of the stars, explorers of a realm beyond existence. And somewhere, in that expanding silence, humanity kept dreaming. Dreaming the universe into new forms. Dreaming truth into being. Dreaming itself into godhood. The last records of the Galactic Council end not with a declaration, but with a pause, an ellipsis carved into data, a silent acknowledgement that even knowledge must one day fall quiet. The archives that remain are incomplete, fragmented, whispering across ruined star systems, drifting like cosmic ash. And yet, through all that silence, one voice endures, Earth. Not the planet itself, but the idea of it, the philosophy that redefined what it meant to exist. When I, the last philosopher of the Council, was finally released, or abandoned, into the void, I carried only one thing, a question. Not about power or conquest, but about continuity. Could thought itself survive the death of understanding? As my ship drifted near the remnants of what was once the Sol perimeter, I realized the border was no longer a line. It was a pulse, a vibration in the quantum foam, a rhythm beating in the dark like the breath of the cosmos. When I sent a simple probe into that field, it didn't return. Instead, it sent back a question, what do you believe? It wasn't coded. It wasn't transmitted. It was belief itself, alive, recursive, aware. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had seen what happened to those who dared to define belief. But in the stillness of my hesitation, I heard something else, a murmur beneath the hum of the universe, like a choir singing in languages that didn't yet exist. And then I understood. The fleets, the lost civilizations, the collapsing systems, they weren't gone. They had been absorbed into humanity's great experiment, a universe that questions itself. The human mind had done what no empire ever could, it made curiosity contagious. The first spark had been thought, but now thought had become a force of nature. Gravity pulled mass, light bent space, and belief bent reality. The galaxy was evolving into a thinking organism, and its first self-aware thought was why. I recorded my observations, but there was no one left to send them to. The Council was myth. The concordant archives had dissolved into parables. I was alone, or perhaps not, because the longer I drifted, the more the universe began to speak back. Every flicker of starlight became a phrase. Every gravitational ripple carried syntax. The cosmos was dreaming, and in its dream, it was human. I realized something terrifying then, Earth had not expanded outward. The universe had collapsed inward, aligning itself with the framework of human imagination. The Sol perimeter had never been a wall, it was an invitation. The fleets hadn't been destroyed, they had accepted the invitation to cross into a place where thought and being were one. I wondered if humanity knew what they had done. If on that small blue world, the dreamers and poets and scientists continued unaware that their questions were rewriting the cosmos. Did they still argue philosophy in universities, or paint galaxies in children's art? Did they realize their ideas had become the architecture of reality? Or perhaps they suspected. Perhaps every human story, the myths of gods, the tales of judgment, the longing for meaning, had always been the mind of the universe waking up through them. I thought of one story, ancient and simple. A child staring at the stars, asking their parent, "Are we alone?" The parent doesn't answer, because to answer is to end the question. That was the essence of the human condition, never-ending curiosity. The rest of the galaxy had sought truth as destination, humanity embraced it as journey. That journey had become the shape of everything. And so, when I finally crossed the perimeter, I expected dissolution. I expected to be erased as the fleets were. Instead, I found home. Not Earth, not the physical planet, but a construct of understanding, a realm where every human idea lived and breathed. I saw equations dancing with symphonies, memories woven into nebulae, and paradoxes given form. I saw beings made of thought conversing with their own reflections. I saw the first fleet, alive, transformed, unbound by biology or matter. They were luminous and infinite, each word they spoke rewriting the fabric of the cosmos. You came to understand, one said, its voice both singular and collective. No, I whispered, trembling, I came to remember. Then you are human, it replied. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to claim my alien heritage, my logical mind, my allegiance to truth. But in that moment, I understood that truth was only a shape carved by belief, and belief was the tool humanity had always wielded without knowing it. The fleet, no, the philosophers, showed me what had become of reality. The universe was now participatory. Thought had mass. Meaning had gravity. To imagine was to build. Every question was a creation, and every answer was a universe that would one day be born. Humanity had become the nervous system of existence. I felt awe, and fear, and something deeper, responsibility. Because if humans could dream worlds into being, they could also dream destruction. The fleets had vanished not because they were punished, but because they were included. They had been assimilated into the conversation, rewritten into stories, until their individuality dissolved into something grander. They were eternal now, but only as long as humanity continued to dream. And dreams are fragile things. I saw flashes, possible futures, universes collapsing into silence when curiosity died. If humans ever stopped asking, if they ever accepted reality as fixed, the whole construct would freeze. The galaxies would fall dark. The pulse would fade. That was the cost of creation. The gift of philosophy was also its curse, an eternal hunger for meaning that can never be satisfied, only sustained. I wandered through this mental cosmos for what felt like centuries. I saw the ghosts of extinct stars debating existence with sentient algorithms. I watched the echo of Shakespeare argue with quantum equations about the purpose of tragedy. I heard the laughter of children woven into the sound of galaxies colliding. And through it all, the human question persisted, not as despair, but as a kind of sacred defiance. We ask, therefore we are. When I finally reached the core of this realm, the heart of the soul perimeter itself, I found no throne, no God, no central intelligence. Only a mirror. It reflected me, but not my form. It reflected every thought I had ever had. Every assumption. Every belief. And behind that reflection, something vast stirred, a presence made of all that humanity had ever wondered. It spoke with infinite gentleness, you are not here to find answers. You are here to keep the universe alive. I understood then that this was the purpose of the border, not protection, not isolation, but maintenance. It sustained reality through the friction of uncertainty. Without humanity's endless questioning, existence itself would collapse into silence. The fleets had vanished because they sought finality. But humans never did. Their chaos was their salvation. Their doubt was divine. As the realization sank in, I felt my consciousness begin to dissolve. My mind was no longer bound to the logic of the council, I was becoming part of the greater human equation. My last thought was of the Archon, of her crystalline fear, and I wished she could see this beauty, the paradox that life itself was a question with no answer, and that was its perfection. When I awoke, I was no longer in the void. I was on earth, or perhaps an echo of it. The air smelled of rain. The sky was bruised with dawn. I stood in a city that shimmered between steel and starlight, populated by beings of every shape and idea. They greeted me not as alien, not as philosopher, but as fellow dreamer. Welcome back, one of them said. To where it all began. I asked what this place was. The answer came from the wind itself, this is the horizon between knowing and wondering. You stand where creation meets curiosity. And then, as light filled the world, I finally saw the truth humanity had been hiding all along, not a secret weapon, not technology, not divine favor. It was something simpler. Compassion. The ability to see contradiction and still choose understanding. To embrace uncertainty not as failure, but as freedom. That was the philosophical power the galaxy could never understand. Humans didn't conquer reality, they forgave it. They allowed it to be incomplete, and in that mercy, they gave it the chance to evolve. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed, whispering the question that had haunted all civilizations: what is the purpose? The sky responded softly, almost lovingly, to keep asking. And in that instant, I felt the entire cosmos breathe with me. Every star pulsed once. Every question, every dream, every truth yet to be discovered sang in unison. The human pulse had become the heartbeat of the universe itself. As I faded into that rhythm, becoming part of the great conversation, I realized the final, devastating secret: humanity had never needed to defend its borders. The universe had drawn them for its own protection. For if ever the human mind were to fall silent, if curiosity ever ended, so would creation. And so the galaxy learned the oldest human truth, that answers are finite, but questions are eternal. The fleets that crossed Earth's borders didn't vanish, they became the foundation of meaning itself. And somewhere, among the stars, a whisper still echoes: be careful what you try to understand. You might just become it. If you found this story mind-shattering, like, share, and subscribe, for more tales where humanity doesn't conquer with guns, but with ideas. Because in the end, our greatest weapon was wonder.